Welcome to another episode of Brute Facts. Tonight we have Brad and Seamus with Altarnate Media. They're going to be joining us to talk a little Messianic Judaism. Make sure you stick around. It's definitely going to be a fun one.
Welcome to the Brute Facts Podcast with your host and everybody's favorite Christian, Eddie Kroon. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell for future content.
Hello. Welcome, Brad, and welcome, Seamus.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Mr. Eddie.
Yes, I know it is.
We've been waiting on this.
Yeah, I know that's right. How you guys doing tonight?
Not bad. I'm gonna wave at you with my good hand.
With the good hand. Do we have the beers? Everybody got the beers?
Oh, yep.
Okay.
There we go. Forgive me. I have to reach my good hand. So I took the splint off, so you can.
Oh, nice. What in the world did you do to your hand?
Oh, that's what it looks like when a tank hatch comes down on your fingers unexpectedly.
No. So are you a CDAT?
What?
Okay, I can't. Never mind. I can't say it.
No, I'm a Marine in the reserves currently.
Okay.
Combat engineer.
Stands for crazy dumbass tanker.
No, that's definitely not me. I'm more the crayon eating ground guy.
My former brother-in-law is I believe he was a tank commander, and he said that's what they called them all the time, were CDATs. And I was like, all right, cool, nice name.
It's actually my first time hearing that, but yeah, I don't actually talk with the tank guys very much ever. So we actually the Marine Corps totally got rid of tanks recently. So.
I think we got a Navy guy in the house too. Captain Dadpool's in there. I think he came to give you some trouble.
He was Army.
Yeah, I thought he would. Yeah, he was Army. I thought.
Yeah, he's infantry Army.
Oh, that's right. He was Army.
11 Bravo.
He's going to be so mad.
And if he's watching, I'm your equivalent of a 12 Bravo.
Sorry, Dadpool. That was Seamus's fault. So it's no secret that you guys are not typical evangelical Christians, given today's idea. So would you identify as Messianic Jews?
It usually depends on the audience. I say this a lot because to some people, the term Messianic Jew specifically means a Jewish man who believes in the Messiah. And I speak for myself here, as Brad he actually does have a drop of Jewish blood in him somewhere, but I do not. I'm 100% Irish. I have zero Jewish blood in me at all. And so sometimes for the sake of clarity, I don't like using that term so as to not mislead anybody into thinking that I'm Jewish by birth or anything. But generally speaking, our practice would be Messianic Jewish as typically referred.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brad. I'm sorry.
I was going to say the only thing I really have to add to that, which the little bit of Jewishness that exists in my DNA is not enough to even qualify me halakhically speaking. But no, the only thing that I would typically add, one of the reasons I tend to avoid the title Messianic Jewish is because there are a number of other doctrinal positions that do tend to come with that title, which I think I can speak for both Seamus and I, we do not attest to. So it's a bit of a complicated thing to explain where we are.
Right.
Yeah, I usually just say Messianic Gentile sometimes.
I know that ethnic and Orthodox Jews take a lot of times they'll take offense to non-ethnic or non-Orthodox Jews saying that they're Jewish. However, I've always known Torah practicing Christians that hold to Christ as more or less Messianic Jews, but I know that it's not monolithic either. You have Trinitarians, Unitarians, and they're all over the place. So that's cool. We won't call you Messianic Jews, then. I should probably take that off the flyer, but
No,
yeah, it's all good. It's the easiest way to identify us to Christians.
Yeah.
Typically, we tended to more so avoid that when speaking to Jewish people,
right.
because we don't want, at least in their mind, to associate the doctrinal positions that we don't hold that are in common with the Messianic Jewish movement.
Okay. So are you guys are some type of Unitarian, I take it?
I call it a strict monotheist, and that's gonna tick off a lot of my Christian friends, and that is because I fundamentally reject the idea that they are a monotheist, which is why I coined the term strict monotheist, because Unitarian also has a number of other philosophies attached to it that I don't necessarily adhere to. For instance, there are some people who would call themselves Unitarian when in reality they're modalists, which is just a more logical format for the Trinity.
Yeah, that's if I had $1 for every time I heard, well, that's a heresy. That's a heresy. And I'm just like, and what's your point? So what?
Well, so what I hate about using the term heresy, I don't actually talk about this often, but when you say something like modalism is heresy, which, you know, I would agree with in this particular case, bad example maybe, but when you say something like that, heresy is typically defined as something that is a deviance from the Catholic belief. And most of Protestantism would be considered a heresy per the Catholic Church. But when you say with definite, like even as a Protestant, like this is a heresy, you've given the Catholic Church the full authority to claim it as a heresy when it may or may not be. It's just something that they decided on a couple thousand years ago. And so sometimes I like to avoid using that for certain belief systems so as not to give too much credence to the Catholic Church, because really they're the ones who decided what was and what isn't a heresy.
Right. And from my understanding, there's really not technically as many heresies as what people think they are. I was doing some reading into it, and a lot of, like, you know, I weakly hold to a Trinitarian view at this point. Partialism would be the closest to me. And for those who aren't familiar, it's that Christ, the Holy Spirit, and God the Father together make up God. They're not God individual. But I'm slowly leaning more and more to some type of Unitarian view, which is why I call myself an agnostic Christian right now, because I'm just not sure. But partialism, I don't believe is technically even a heresy. I think that anything that's considered a deviation from, like you said, the Catholic Church's view that all three are holy God individually and together holy God, total contradiction.
Yeah,
but
Creed. Yep.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people say, well, if you don't hold to that view, then it's heretical. But I don't believe there's anything really in the Catechism to say that partialism is heretical.
It's I think so. There's a progression. Partialism is something that did exist. It's actually sort of the reason why St. Patrick was initially not welcome, because he used the shamrock, and the shamrock model is the partialist model, where like the three together in one.
Right.
And so he initially was kind of like, but he was able to brush it over, just using it as a terrible metaphor, in his words. But yeah, I think it was at the time of Augustine of Hippo deemed a heresy, and that's around 500 AD is when we had a more solid modern definition of the Trinity that we have today. And that's a relatively important fact to express when discussing the modern definition, is that the Trinity's definition changed for almost 500 years until it was finally really, even after the First Council of Nicaea, that was a very rough draft. They had to go back for a second council in Constantinople and add the Holy Spirit to the Trinity. They left him out the first time. And that was in 385. So 40 years after the initial council. And then, of course, in 500 AD, Augustine of Hippo finally codifies what we have as today's modern definition. So it's kind of this wishy-washy kind of back and forth progressive revelation, most Christians will call it. It's something that kind of had to develop over time.
Right.
But I think by 500, everything else was considered heresy.
That's, and I'll let Brad speak to this. To me, it all hinges on whether the church is the authority or not. So most Protestants would deny that the Catholic Church is any kind of authority, yet they're quick to call things heresies. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're appealing to the authority of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of one of those things where I guess I'll be the offensive one in this one, Seamus, since I'm kind of already bordering it so far. I refer to most of the rest of Christianity outside of Catholicism and the Eastern Orthodox sects as like diet Catholic or Catholic light, because they still retain most of Catholicism. There's just a handful of items that they've rejected from Catholicism. And the funny thing is, as far as they think that they've traveled from Catholicism, as soon as you challenge the parts of Catholicism they still hold on to, they instantly turn into like devout Catholics. I mean, hence the use of the word heresy, which heresy, historically speaking, is a matter of dates and popularity. What is considered heresy now would not have been considered heresy in 25 AD, but then all the way into 90 AD, then it might have been considered heresy based on whatever the popular accepted teachings were at the time.
Yeah, and another thing that really gets me is, a lot of it has to do, the differences, a lot of it has to do with sacraments and whether grace is infused, through certain practices in the church itself. And that in the liturgical style of worship, I think Anglican and a few others still, or Lutherans, Eastern Orthodox, or they hold to a very similar style of worship and hold to some of the sacraments. But the more that I study Judaism, the idea of the church having this authority and this, it's like streamlining, or this go-between for grace to be infused to the followers, from what people consider an authority. To me, I don't find this in Jewish thought.
As far as, okay, so the go between. How do you mean by that?
In the grace that's infused through the sacraments, through the
through the sacraments. Okay.
Yeah, through the practice, which ultimately goes to the authority of the church again.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I actually, so as a historian, I can kind of answer this a little bit. I think it comes from a Gentile misunderstanding of the idea of the Hebrew grace, because believe it or not, the Hebrew word for grace actually does imply merit. It's usually when you see, like when Abraham falls down or something, he says, "If I have found favor," and then he makes a request. That's the Hebrew word for grace. If I have found favor. So it kind of implies this idea of merit, and that has its own theological implications, of course. And it's very easy for somebody who is not super familiar with Jewish thought, Jewish interpretation of law, and Eastern mindset to take that and think there is a sense of actual merit that you have to offer up in order to receive the meritless grace, right? So I can see why historically it kind of develops eventually into the Catholic thought. And it's generally, as with most things, based off of Gentiles reading a document they know little about and making their own interpretations from there without that outside help from the original, like from the Jewish source.
I wasn't aware. I mean, I did, as far as grace goes, I didn't really think in, Jewish thought really too much near what, Catholicism. But now that you mention it, I can see how they would kind of see that, certain practices and things, because correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the highest forms of worship is study, like hours and hours of study. And it's not just to learn, it's like a connection, I believe, because they would go to the houses and study for like all night,
intimacy.
Right.
It's it's viewed as being a form of unifying your mind with that of God in a way, because the Torah is understood to be the nature of God, which would come from the mind of God, and so when you're engaged in studying it and connecting to it with your mind, this is seen as being a unifying factor. So yeah, definitely the highest form of worship in Judaism is study.
Mm-hmm.
So briefly, how did each one of you, were you guys raised in Christianity? Were you non-believers? And how did you get to the type of Christianity that you follow?
I feel like I've been talking more than you, so you want to start this one?
I did grow up in Christianity. I grew up in a very independent, fundamental style of Christianity. And my father was a very well-respected member of most any church that we happened to join, no matter where we moved. And he ultimately is the one who let his Bible fall open to Matthew 5:17 through 19, and reading it out loud, it's like it hit him differently for the first time. It's like for the first time he actually understood what the passage was saying. So he led the family down this path, and I fought him for a good 2 or 3 years because I grew up very steeped in independent fundamental Baptist doctrine. And when I say steeped, like at the age of 12 years old, I could have an intelligent discussion with an adult about the finer points of 5-point Calvinism. That's just how my dad raised me. And to rip the rug from under me the way that he did, it was like I was not going to have it. But eventually I ended up coming around after being wrong in a number of arguments that he and I had. And that's one of the things that I try and explain to people. A lot of people say that I will speak on the subjects that I speak on as though I already know that I'm right. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because I've already been proven wrong on this topic. Like I've already had a shift in my theology. which is not to say that I'm 100% right now, but I'm fairly certain that I'm a little closer.
You're battle tested. That's all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you had mentioned your dad was pretty well into the study, and it only goes to make sense considering the library that you have behind you.
This is only like a quarter of what my dad's got at his house.
Yeah.
So I got to know, do you guys ever like open the book and smell it?
Oh, all the time.
Every time.
Old book and new book smell are the two best smells.
Yes.
Why do we do weird stuff like that? I've never figured
Humans are weird.
Sometimes I would just look at a book on the shelf and be like, hey, that's an old one. Yeah. It
Smells
reminds me
like
of the
old.
library at school. I'm going to put it back.
It's part of an ancient ritual that we just forgot a long time ago.
Yeah, that goes with book collecting. That is a addiction. I read more articles than I do anything, and it's like, oh, I gotta have that book. I've got a couple of them. You and I had talked about, the Talmud. I'm still like, it costs so much money. It just,
Oh yeah,
but
that's a couple grand there.
now I did get, because I am a philosophy guy, I did get a book on Maimonides.
I was just gonna say Maimonides.
My
philosophy.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm digging it, man. I really am digging it. He's, I see why he's considered one of the greatest Jewish philosophers. I mean, the guy is he's a genius, man.
I don't know if this was true of him or not, but it's said that by the time he was 13, he had the whole Talmud memorized. He could,
Wow.
verse for verse, like you could pull it up, like, hey, what does Nida 56 Bravo say? And he could just the whole thing.
Well, I don't think that's. I mean, that's a feat in itself, just the amount of writings. But being a historian, I mean, I know that the way that they used to memorize just entire books and things are just it's insane. It's like life sucked.
Well, they didn't have TV and theater and all sorts of other stuff to occupy them.
Beer.
So.
Yeah, that would keep me from memorizing. So how did you get to where you're at, Seamus? Not the hurt hand part, but
Oh yeah. Well.
oh.
Can you see the little rods in the?
Yes.
Yes.
How cool is that?
I spent the last year having surgery on both of mine, open palm surgery on both of mine. And oh my gosh, we're getting close ups. I'm going to have to make this rated R now. Thanks.
No, it's for medical reasons. You don't have to think it.
It's educational.
It's gore.
There are no open wounds. So for me, forgive me if in the middle of speaking I have to stop. So this is still like kind of a painful process.
Okay.
And so sometimes if I stop, it's probably because I'm just trying to manage it. But so I didn't start out, I would say, in a churchy home. I grew up in an Irish home, and ipso facto, you're Irish or Catholic now, right? That's just how it was. But by no stretch of the imagination were we a devout household. So I just grew up a regular kind of life. I was a skateboarder throughout middle school, and I get into high school. My parents are going through like this crazy, really weird divorce thingy. And so I was kind of being tossed about a little bit. And at some point, I end up being grounded for like a whole year. My dad's on deployment for the whole year. And so I'm grounded until he comes back, was basically the stipulation. And that was, I wasn't allowed to do anything fun. And that was including reading anything except a Bible. The Bible was the only thing I had in my room. And I hated Christians at the time. I thought of them as, goody two shoes. You're super blessed. So of course it's easy for you to believe in a God that blesses you because you have all the money and you've never really known any real hardship. So it's easy for you. So I decided to take that and read it and use my free time to try and disprove it historically. I figured trying to disprove the existence of God, if it could be done, it would have been done a long time ago. And philosophically, it's just not possible So instead of taking that route, the scientific route, I decided to take the historical route, try to disprove the document, and at the very least say that this document is wrong. Long story short, years go by, and I'm incredibly well versed in biblical archaeology by now. And eventually, I was more than convinced that this document is inhuman. It's crazy we still have it. Its survival, I think, is a testament to an existence of something protecting it.
Right.
In my mind at the time. And so over time, I just become more and more convinced with the more historical things that I tend to find. And so what started out as me trying to disprove it so that I could shove it in Christians' faces turned into, it basically backfired. But at the same time, because of that, because I was very historically informed, I still kind of managed to stay within my goal of, like, I guess, not hating on Christianity. I would consider myself today, just by strict definition of the word, a Christian, right? But when you learn the history, you have a very different view of the New Testament that most Christians have. And that's kind of how I got into a little bit of the Torah scene. It started out with a small question, like, why did the Sabbath day change? And eventually I met this man here in the bottom of the screen. And I ended up talking with his father, and he introduced me to other documents and sources that I was able to go to college. I eventually left for college at Liberty University, and I had access and time to study these things. And that's where I learned most of what I do know now. Brad, he had the privilege of actually kind of growing up with those things as well, and having a long time to hash those things out. I did what he did in like 10 years, I would say. He was 10 years above me. I was able to get in 4 at Liberty only because I had full unadulterated access to the documents that I was introduced to. And then we kind of met back up after college, and now we're basically on the same page, except he's a little bit more of I think I would consider Brad way more philosophically and theologically oriented than myself, whereas I tend to focus strictly on the history. But that's kind of my story. I ended up kind of historying my way into it.
So you guys are like a tag team. You got one that's historical and the other theological and philosophical. And
yep.
Yeah.
We've been thunder and lightning ever since.
Thunder and lightning. Oh my goodness. That movie. If that was a quote from the rundown, I absolutely love that movie. So I'm kind of working backwards. After I've spent so much time in philosophy that I'm not ignorant to theology. I did spend quite a bit of time early on in theology, but loving philosophy as much as I do, it's I've always kind of come at the Bible and Christianity and stuff more from a historical angle, because I just like the backstory to it and trying to put things I'm an analytic person. I want to know why, the building blocks, how we got there. And so now I'm kind of like going backwards and tearing the building blocks down from what I was taught. And Brad and I don't know if you saw it or not, Seamus, had kind of a debate kind of thing on the tour. And we had talked beforehand. I told him, I said, I don't know how much of a debate it's going to be. We pretty much agree on most of everything from, the historical analysis and cultural context that I've been learning behind it. Just not sold on the tour part. That's it. So your dad, man, he's like a superstar.
He is. One day, this is a side story. We were telling each other riddles to see who could figure it out the fastest. And I told him one. It took us both forever to figure it out, like all day, just bothered us. And so we were like, yo, we need to go and your dad is just a genius. So we need to go and ask him and see how long it takes him. And so like we waltz up and we're like kind of full of ourselves. We're like, this one's a good one. There's no way he'll get it.
Mind you, he's like setting lumber up in the garage.
I was just gonna say, yeah,
like he's just storing away wood.
Okay, wait a minute, hold on.
Just doing carpentry things.
Hold the story. So he's an uber male and super intelligent.
So
he's a Jewish carpenter. It's hilarious.
It has been said about him before that he only has a Y chromosome. He's just physically incapable of producing girls because I am number 2 out of 7 boys.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So does he like sneeze and grow a beard?
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah. This man, and he's Cuban and he's got kind of a darker complexion, so he looks incredibly Middle Eastern.
Wow,
which is really funny.
Cuban and denies Orthodox Christianity. That's, I mean,
yeah, right.
He has to be disowned. I mean,
well, he's got a shady past too, so his family.
Okay.
Yeah,
my wife is Italian. You know, her grandfather, and he came here from Italy, and when he saw me, he knew I wasn't Italian. I mean, it's obvious. And then when he found out I wasn't Roman Catholic, I thought he was going to fall over dead. It was like, you know, and they lived in South Florida, so the other half of the family was Cuban. So they all got along with the Orthodox thing and the Christianity thing. And I'm sitting here, the odd Protestant out, like, hey, yeah, everybody hates me, you know.
Yeah, my family in Ireland, Roman Catholics tend to have an anti-Semitic lean, especially in the Irish community. And so when my family in Ireland found out, it was very,
yeah, they're as bad as Roman Catholics. So
we go in and he's just working away. He's like putting lumber away. He just got finished cutting some boards up or something and doing carpentry stuff. And we're like, hey, we got a riddle for you. And we tell him the riddle real quick. It's kind of a long one, but we get done telling him and giving him all the rules and the parameters. And he kind of sat for like a second and he thought, and it felt like maybe 30 seconds. Yeah. He just sat there like this. And he was like, it's this. Am I right? And we were like, wow, that was fast. Hold on. And then he went right back to putting wood away. And he was like, yeah, well, that's easy because it should be obvious. And we were like, dude, it took us like 5 hours. What are you talking about? Obvious?
Felt so dumb.
So your dad is like Jesus's nephew.
He's smart. This man speaks perfect English. You would never know that English is not his first language.
Wow.
But he speaks better English than me.
Wow.
There are times where he's talking to me and he just assumes I know certain words and he uses a word and I'm like, dog, you're gonna have to slow down. I don't know the definition of that, what you just said there.
Okay.
I'm not sure what melodramatic means.
Yeah, Brad, you're gonna have to humanize this man.
I actually think that the first time I had that problem was, and he was like, well, I like that the Holman uses the word propitiation instead of whatever word some other translation uses in like Colossians. And I was like, yeah, me too. What does that mean?
we need to hear some embarrassing stories about your dad. He won't watch.
Oh goodness. I couldn't tell anything embarrassing.
Honor your father.
I will say I've won exactly one argument against the man. That is it. That is the only thing I can ever claim. And that is and it in the end of everything it ended up not even being an argument. It was just a point of agreement between us. Darn it. But there was an extreme disagreement for a long time about like musical genre, right? Whereas I come from the position of like, okay, well, there is nothing inherently evil about the organization of notes or what instrument they're played on. And better yet, I actually went even further to suggest that modern heavy metal as it is today is actually closer to classical music than any other genre that currently exists. And so then Two Cellos did their cover of Thunderstruck, and I was like, proof, I win.
That's right. Nobody is, as far as metal goes, nobody has been more creative than the Australian band that uses the
the didgeridoo.
The didgeridoo, yes, and they make hard rock metal music with a didgeridoo, and it's awesome.
Have you heard of Eluvite though?
Yeah.
Eluvite, no. How do you spell that?
Eluveitie.
Bagpipe metal.
No,
It's straight up Celtic metal.
Oh yeah,
No.
It's like the
Folk
most
metal.
Norse Celtic thing
You
that
know
you've
what?
ever heard.
Now I have seen some. I might have. Do they have like a female like headbanging and with the and there's it's like this real
With a hurdy-gurdy?
yeah, and it's a real well done, high quality videos and stuff that goes with. I think I have.
He's probably talking about Call of the Mountain.
Yeah, probably.
Oh,
That's a
Call
great
of the
one.
Mountain.
That sounds like
That's the
it's a song
song.
by them,
Yeah.
but what you're describing sounds like the music video Call of the Mountain.
Because I think it was when I was looking at trying to find the didgeridoo metal band that I ran across, and I was like, these people are rocking, man, and they're just they got the bagpipes going, and it's just like, how do you headbang to that? And then I'm like headbanging, and it's like, yeah, there we go.
There it is. It's possible.
It absolutely is. So yeah, I'm a metal guy myself. I kind of went through a lot of phases. I like a lot of hip hop too. So I actually
one of those. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's part of growing up.
no. I mean, I actually one of my playlists is actually metal and hip hop, and it kind of bounces around. But I like NF and what is the guy? The
you could just
atheist
do
guy, Hobson, and
could just
I
do
like,
metal hip hop and listen to Attila.
New metal.
Hey, well, Tech Nine did one with I think it was Corey from Slipknot.
Corey Taylor.
Taylor, yeah.
The man.
Yeah, and it was pretty hard. I liked it. It was like, yeah, both of these going rock on. So Brad, make your dad human.
Oh goodness.
Oh yeah, we got to stop deifying your dad real quick.
Like, seriously.
No, seriously.
He. Well, I'm like the clone of him. Like, if you've seen me, you've seen my father.
Yeah,
quite literally.
Spitting image. Couldn't deny. You're his firstborn, so
that was a clever. That was a clever move there. I saw.
You like that one?
So did he immigrate?
Belief in Trinity.
Brad, his dad, and Seamus. There we go. We got the Trinity.
Yes, he did immigrate back in the 60s. It was one of the last planes out of Cuba, I think. So he and my grandmother and my tia, they moved here, and he grew up poor side of town in Massapequa Park, Long Island, New York. Okay. But he did, for the most part, grow up Catholic. And there came a point in his life where he observed the behavior of certain people in the church and realized that he had a higher standard of morality on his own without church. So went on his own, I'll call it a spiritual journey of discovery, where he encountered a few individuals, all from faith backgrounds that all had an impact on him. And eventually, they came around. He and my mother, it was after they were married that they came around and got saved and became born again believers. And that story on its own is a fantastic one, but that's one I like to let them tell, because it's got a lot to do with their marriage and the beginnings of it and everything. But it's one of those miraculous ones where there's kind of no explanation for it.
Right. Yeah,
that's a wonderful story.
That's interesting. I have such a heart for immigrants in this country because especially non-white immigrants, because to be so close to where we are, and to be, a lot of people don't realize how bad the Irish and even Italians and the Europeans were treated when they came here. And a lot of the people that are descendants from those immigrants have the same feelings towards, those that don't look like us and act like us, coming to this country. So I'm glad that he did, because you're here, and I'm glad he got out of Cuba.
Likewise.
So did he marry your mom? Did he find your mom here, or?
Yes. So he he joined the army and was stationed in Fort Stewart, just outside of Savannah, Georgia, and that is where he met my mom.
Okay, cool.
So yeah,
he found a Southern Belle.
Oh yeah, no, he grew up. He grew up in New York, moved down south, met a Southern belle, and decided he was never going back up north.
Yep.
Do you know the difference between? I'm sorry for my northern friends. This is funny. I don't care about the whole South and North thing, but do you know the difference between a Yankee and a damn Yankee?
I don't know this one, but
yes. Okay,
Yankees come to the South to visit. Damn Yankees come and stay.
Oh, that's funny. My wife is a Yankee. I guess she's a damn Yankee then.
So I thought the damn Yankee
Snowbirds.
was the one who married your daughter.
That's that one too. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, wait. We can't talk about that. I got daughters of marriage age, so that's
Get the guns.
I gotta put the man. I don't have any. They're at the bottom of a lake.
Lost him.
Boating accident.
So I got to know, Seamus, did you ever land a kickflip?
Yeah, I won. I won a competition by landing one, actually.
No way. Do you know how long I tried and tried? I quit skating because of kickflips.
Yeah, it's the worst trick ever. I was in a beginner competition, and I think it was like the second kickflip I've ever landed. But
Wow.
all the beginners, kind of do the same basic moves, and because I was the only one to do a flip trick on the floor, I think that's what gave me that first place. So
Awesome.
and it was like they were counting down too. They're like, "You have 5 seconds left, 4," and I was like, "You know what? I got nothing to lose." So I went for it, and I just barely got on the board and kept it going, and so it counted.
Such an inspirational moment. I landed on with the board edge up so many times.
Popsicles.
Well, no, not like that. Like the board landing sideways and then
like primo. Yep.
Yeah, like kicking it out and landing on my head. That's what's wrong with me.
I had a problem with becoming a popsicle.
That's that too. That's right. So did you skate, Brian?
Oh, never on the same level that Seamus did. I toyed around with skateboards for a little while when I was younger, but I was never as good as Seamus is.
You look like a BMX guy.
Yeah, so that I actually did do pretty well, actually. BMX was something that I did play around with a lot.
Yeah.
Nah.
It's the beard.
I never saw it, so I can't confirm it.
How long have you guys known each other?
I still have that board, Brad, by the way, the one you met me with.
Oh, gosh.
It's actually right here.
It's going back a ways. Yeah, no, yeah. We've known each other for 11 years now.
Well, no, 12, right?
Is it 12 now?
Yeah, because we met in like 2008.
No.
2009?
It was, it was it was Winterfest, New Year's 2009, 2010.
I thought it was 08, 09.
You were in so much trouble later, Seamus.
I forgot our anniversary. How dare you? I'm sleeping on the couch tonight. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, speaking of metal music and all this stuff and how we met, actually, because it was at a Winterfest for New Year's at Liberty University. And we were some of the only kids that were actually like going hard headbanging and everything. Like when we went to the mall later, kids recognized us and they come up to us and be like, "You guys are the headbanging dudes." And it's like, yes, that is us.
They put us up on the Jumbotron and we were too busy rocking out to notice. And so we had no idea we were on TV.
Oh, y'all were so Jay and Silent Bob.
Yes.
I'm trying to get, my goal is to get my beard long enough that I can actually headbang with my beard and maybe get it flopping a little bit.
Kind of do the windmill, but with the beard.
Yeah.
Get it kind of just.
Hey, let me tell you something about being bald. You don't realize that your hair is a warning system. I have never in my life hit my head as much as I do since I've been shaving my head. It is insane. It's like we don't even think about, you get close to something and it warns you. But when you don't have hair, you're just like, wow. Sometimes I'm like walking and there's this metal pole over here. My head will like just drive towards the metal pole to hit me on the pole. It's almost like it has a mind of its own.
I think it's Murphy's Law because now everyone can see the bruises.
Yes, Murphy did not believe in the Trinity. So we should probably talk about some theological things here.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. It's like, nah, we do that all the time. But that's kind of what the show's for, is, people let loose, learn more about the people. And, so have you guys written anything, or you do a ton of stuff on TikTok? I absolutely love it. I don't have time to hit the heart on every one of them. And plus you have like 1,000, so you're not even going to know if I did or not. But even though Seamus does not follow me, I do follow him. And
I follow you now.
Oh, okay.
As of 45 minutes ago.
Well, I didn't get an alert. So.
That's because I'm not important enough. I'm not TikTok famous, so like anything I do doesn't matter.
We haven't written anything like official yet. Usually before I do like something solo, or before I do a TikTok series, I'll actually write out, kind of a baseline for what it's going to be about. And I suppose that could make a good kind of launching point for a book if I were to write a book on the subject. But we do have an idea kind of rolling around.
Yeah, for
a book that we plan on writing.
It's still in that planning part of the phase. We do have like an outline, like a very broad outline of some of the chapters and what we want to cover. But we haven't begun the actual writing process quite yet. I think Brad did write like 3 pages a little bit ago. But
writing's hard.
Yeah, a little bit. The easiest mode, like what Brad was saying, honestly, the thing to do would be to write down like a TikTok video that we're about to do it, and then save that and kind of put it in a book.
Yeah, kind of like an audio format kind of thing. Well, I mean, the information from the audio, because you guys do cover, especially Brad. I mean, Brad, bro, it's like, how much coffee do you drink?
I've been less active lately because of sleep, actually, because I work an hour from home. So I have an hour-long commute and then an hour-long commute back, and so I just don't have the time anymore like I used to.
Yeah, and I enjoy you guys' YouTube channel too. Tell me a little bit about the Killing Church series. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching Killing the Church, I believe it is. What was the idea there? What is give them a little bit of information on it?
Yeah, we decided a long time ago that we either wanted to do a book or a podcast or a YouTube channel or something like that together, discussing this, because the Hebrew word for it is escaping me right now. Seamus, you'll have to remind me. But basically, the study partner, your chavrusa.
Havruta, it's with a T. Tav.
Okay, well,
you're not Ashkenazi.
It's like all the Jews that I speak to, you say it that way. Anyway, but it's the study partner that you're kind of assigned or you grow up with, and that's kind of how we have functioned forever. And so we just decided that we wanted to do this kind of endeavor together, but we weren't really sure exactly how to go about presenting it. And we already know that kind of what we believe in our theology is a little more offensive as it is anyway. So we figure probably go for a shock and awe kind of name. So naturally, Killing the Church is going to be something that draws attention. And it's got a double entendre. So, it's where we discuss things that are killing the church, but also things that are in the church and probably need to be killed, things that the church could do without.
It fits perfect with, current polls and things with the nons, because the church, at least the evangelical church, it's suffering, but there's a lot of things that it needs to suffer for. There's a lot of things that need to be weeded out of it. If I'm not mistaken, like even with the oral Torah, the purpose of having the oral Torah is to reinterpret, to keep God's word applicable and relevant and kind of molding with the changes of society, not necessarily going with societal norms, but making it to where it's understood better in modern terms.
It depends on your definition of, I guess, oral Torah, because there are halachic rulings that can change over time. Halacha, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but for the viewers who are not, it's just the fancy way of Hebrew way of saying how you do a commandment, because the commandments themselves are actually vague. They don't tell you how to do them. And so, but much of the oral Torah is an explanation on how to do many of these things. And there are some times where it accounts for the changes in times, but a lot of it is actually sort of the reason that Judaism refuses to change with the time. I would say that the oral Torah in and of itself has always distinguished Judaism regardless of the culture or time it was always living in.
I was thinking of the best way to word that, because I didn't want to come off as reinterpreting to accept changing societal norms.
Yeah.
It's more just making it not...
We would say clarifying.
There you go. Yeah. It's more relatable.
Especially like some of the harder laws that are difficult to understand. What the oral traditions actually allow for us to do is to see inside of the mind of the early believer when they read that law. Because some of the oral traditions are just halachic rulings, and they've actually more or less maybe have forgotten the original tradition that was passed down. There's actually a tradition that states that there were 70 layers to every single verse in the Torah, but much of it has been lost. And so some of these are just halachic rulings on based on a lack of information, but also based on what they understood when they read that commandment. And I got into a debate once on TikTok about the stoning of a rebellious child, and how that's one of the most misunderstood laws in the entire Torah. And if you were just read the Mishnah on that entire section, you'd come away with a completely different understanding.
What isn't it the, like, for example, all of the you should put them to death, and all of that didn't mean that was like the maximum penalty punishment, but they really would pay fines and pay penances or things like that. Isn't the oral Torah, like, doesn't it lay out the guidelines for what you should pay for these things? It's much like our justice system now. You could get life in jail, but you can get probation and pay a fine or something like that.
Yeah, it certainly depended on the ruling. So that's actually the judge's job, is to decide what your sentence is. And you're not wrong in saying that the death penalty was usually a maximum sentence, that you could have lesser sentences involved. But that's usually only in the case in which something would warrant a death penalty, but you don't have enough witnesses to confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt. And if that's the case, then you would decide on like some sort of fine or community service. Or even in some cases, a lot of cases, they would simply say, well, if you die within the next year, it means you were guilty.
Yeah,
and they would just let you go with a lack of witnesses.
Which
Yeah,
that
right.
happened a majority of the time, actually.
Yeah.
And you would have to have at least 2 witnesses to even bring the charge, right?
So 2 witnesses for minor crimes, 3 witnesses for capital crimes.
Right. So, I mean, trying to get, 3 witnesses to say that he didn't honor his father, one of them's going to be the father. And, it's.
Well, that one's interesting because you can't, the plain reading of the text, you can't enforce that law. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Because it would be a law that would apply to a minor, but you can't charge a minor with a crime. So then you would have to be charging an individual who's not a minor, but it's rebellious child, right? And so we actually have a problem in which, basically, long story short, the problem is nobody can levy this charge against another person except for the boy's own father, and only in the case of a person who refuses to take his bar mitzvah. And so that's the stipulation, and the Torah doesn't really read you that, but because of all this, the laws that surround the Torah, that's the only possible way you could ever enforce that law, is if the child refuses to bar mitzvah, i.e. become a man.
Right.
And so he would have to be a man who refuses to become a man, and the only person who is allowed to bring that child and levy this charge against him is this father. And the Talmud actually records that this charge has never been exercised ever in the history of Israel, because no father ever wants to bring the death penalty charge against their child. That you figure, I can fix this, just give me time, kind of thing. And and so
listen to me. I'm gonna go take you up there, and you gonna get killed, boy.
Yeah, it is very much intended to be a last resort that only the father can use. And so even if you have 10 witnesses, and one of those witnesses want to be the one to bring it forth, can't do it. It's got to be the father.
But see, what I love about this example, actually, it's one of those. It's one of the examples that I think, because of what Seamus just explained, is probably one of the most abused by atheists who want to make the argument that God is some kind of a moral monster. Is there any number of other ones to choose from, but this is not a good one because of the historical context involved. It's like that's a very easy one to dismiss. But in addition to that, I think it's also abused by Christians, namely Christian parents, right? Because if anybody who's grown up in a independent fundamental Baptist setting understands that this verse was very, very accessible in an adult's arsenal. This is something that children would often be reminded of, right? It's like, right. Well, you've got it easy because back then I could have stoned you for telling me no, or something like that. And it's like, no, that's not what that means. It's like you would be charged with murder if you did that to your child for refusing to wash the dishes. That's not what it meant. There are blatant stipulations on what crimes had to be committed for this to even be a valid complaint. And it's one of those where it's like, I like to tell Christian parents, it's like, look, God already has a standard of what your child is supposed to meet. Like, you don't get to decide that. God decided that. And so you don't get to levy this charge if it's not violating God's standard. And
this is actually part of the reason why me and Brad decided to start the Altarnate Media ministry to begin with. Because a lot of the times when you read through the Old Testament, it's incredibly intimidating, especially the Torah. And if you don't have a thorough background in Judaism or even first century history, well, even older than that, but at least in general, a first century history, it's really intimidating. You read some of these things and you think, wow, that seems really unmoral for God to allow someone to stone their child. And like X, Y, and Z, name whatever law it is, sell your daughter into slavery, another one that's commonly misinterpreted a lot. And so we hope to normalize information that would normally be sought after with a master's degree. The kind of thing that we had a youth pastor who was back in the day, he was actually getting his master's degree, and me and Brad were just having a casual conversation about a couple of historical figures in the Talmud. And this guy was like, dude, I'm working on my 3rd master's degree and I'm only just now learning about these two. I feel like I've wasted my whole life and money on these degrees. And that's actually kind of our goal. It's a little bit of an inspiration that we took was, if more Christians were more aware, they'd be less afraid of reading the Torah, and that would arm them with the kind of information they need to even just go out and talk to the normal, regular, everyday person, and especially other Christians, and help enrich or strengthen your faith, knowing that there really is a logical, stream of thought within the entire Bible. It's not just this archaic, like we kill people now or back then, but we don't now. It just kind of seems really disconnected and removed, and that's not the case. And so,
yeah, well, we can't close out the stream without a philosophical question.
Ooh.
So I've got to know, Brad, and you have to give me some nuance.
Okay.
What is Jesus's relation to the Father?
Oh, Mike's turning off now.
What a good question.
Because this is one I'm struggling with right now. So I'm laying it at your feet. Right now I'm at the feet of the rabbi.
Oh goodness. I've definitely not earned that title. Good grief.
No, I know.
Brad, aren't you 30?
Not yet, Seamus. Don't put that evil on me.
You're
Oh
You're
my
not
gosh,
30
you're not
yet?
even
Come
30?
You'll be 30 in October, right?
I'll be 30 in October.
Oh my gosh. Man, y'all make
You
me
have to be 30
feel old.
at minimum be 30 before you can even accept the title rabbi.
I used to be the young guy in the room, and now I'm the old guy in the room.
Oh goodness. Okay, Jesus's relation to the Father. So man, there's so much philosophy to discuss before answering this question, but I love the question. So I guess in a simple way, if we, as per the usual, allow Scripture to define Scripture here, Jesus was said that he would be a prophet like Moses. That's what we understand from the Torah itself. Now, Moses was what we call a shaliach, or an agent in the Talmud. An agent is not distinguished from the principal, which is to say that you don't actually refer to them as though they're something other than the person that they represent. You don't refer to them as someone who is distinct and separate yet representing. You would refer to them as though they are the person that they're representing. And this is why God says to Moses that you will be God to Pharaoh. You will be Elohim to Pharaoh. Not like a God, not as a God. It literally says you will be Elohim to Pharaoh. And that is because, especially in the Egyptian religion, Pharaoh was himself seen to be the representation of God on earth within their own pantheon. And so it would be inappropriate, in a sense, for a God to be addressed by a lesser being. And this actually was the importance of Aaron being the mouthpiece of Moses, in that if Moses was God to Pharaoh, then God himself would not have been the one doing the speaking. And so you could almost say that Aaron was a shaliach to Moses, an agent to Moses. This is why he spoke on behalf of Moses to the Pharaoh. And this is already understood as to what the Messiah would be. It was never understood that the Messiah would be God incarnate, but that the Messiah would be an agent of God, a representative of God to the world, to all of mankind, because this was the whole duty of man in the first place. The entire job of Adam was to be a representation of the Creator to the rest of creation. That's why he was set up as the overseer, the manager of creation, as it were. And this is also why Paul refers to Jesus as the second Adam, or the last Adam. So Jesus fulfills the role of an agent of God in multiple ways. And so in any of the places where we see an equation between Jesus and God, which there are few and far between. Most are going to be found in the book of John, and most of them have a caveat that actually makes it very hard for the Trinitarian doctrine to work if you challenge it. But in addition to that, I would say that sticking with John 1, Jesus is the Torah made flesh, and the Torah itself is, as I said earlier, is understood as being the nature of God in written form, or you could even say the essence of God. And so I would say that the relation of Jesus to God is exactly that of the Torah and God. He's
the incarnate law, or the kind of, I guess it would be like he would be like a type or antitype to Moses. He would be like a great prophet, but greater. Would you say the greatest prophet, because he was, so his duty was to deliver Israel, and then ultimately deliver the world through Israel, or bring peace to the world through Israel.
That's
I don't know that I'd say the greatest prophet.
Really?
You would have to, well, because Moses is the foundation.
Right. And
so equal with, because if he's greater than Moses, that means he could override Moses. But Moses is the only reason we know he's the Messiah to begin with. So
and if Moses himself was acting as a mouthpiece for God, then you set up a bit of a contradiction to put him on that level. But see, so I would say
equal to Moses for sure. Yeah,
most certainly.
So I would lean towards Moses being a type and Jesus being the antitype, that Moses was the foreshadowing kind of prophet that would be the culmination of the prophets, which would be Jesus. Not that Moses isn't important or extremely important or a great prophet himself. I don't know. Maybe it's just the lasting bit of evangelical Christianity in me that doesn't want to give up that super significance of Christ.
No, I think honestly what it usually comes down to when it comes to talking with me and Brad is a miscommunication of terms. Because you asked about his prophetic role specifically, and we were answering in accordance with his prophetic role specifically. But he's better than Moses in that upon his resurrection, he's the high priest in heaven, which Moses never was. And that that does put him above Moses, but not on this realm.
Okay. Yeah. So we were talking past each other.
And also king over Israel.
Right.
And therefore the world. There are many offices in which Jesus would definitely be higher than Moses, but as a prophet specifically, it creates a number of contradictory problems for Jesus to be greater than Moses.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah, it was in my terminology. I'm still, typical evangelical Protestant right now. Kind of.
It's Romans, I think, 12, 2. You have to be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Oh yeah.
That's I go to that verse a lot because it's what we do. It incorporates a major transformation of the way that you think, with the Eastern mindset versus the evangelical Western mindset.
Yep.
And so it took, I would say, it took me probably 5 years before I could even start to begin to think in the correct manner, with this transformation and the renewal of my thought process. So I go to that verse a lot because
and that, coming out of fundamentalism, the mindset is the hardest part of fundamentalism to break, because you are taught a way that the world is black and white and there's no gray. It's wrong, it's right. There's no maybe. It's to be a lukewarm Christian is worse than being an atheist or something. So which that now I know that whole scripture was totally like ripped out of context, and it's not even close to what Jesus was talking about the cities from where the water was running, where
Yep.
at least at one end it's hot, and at least
That's
at
the
the other
historical
end,
context for you.
right, exactly. And it's
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, he's saying, oh, whoa, because they get warm water. They don't even get cold or hot. At least they're,
Yeah.
that's what Protestantism has done to, not only that, I mean, Orthodoxy too.
As a philosophy guy, Eddie, I definitely got to recommend a set of books for you to get.
Yes, recommend a Ray, baby.
Especially since you're currently reasoning through the subject of the Trinity, and that would definitely be the Tanya.
Ooh.
That is one that actually, so Seamus and I have recommended this to another evangelical friend of ours, and he's just now going through it. And so, like, just now we're getting screenshots of pages from it, and like this statement outlining how now his understanding has shifted. And it's like, yes, this is what we've been telling you.
That's just it. The more I learn about Second Temple Judaism, the more I have got a richness of New Testament that I have never seen or read before, because knowing who Jesus is talking to and what he means by using certain things going on at the time, just the turning the other cheek. It's not even close to what most people, it's like,
Or the coin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm just like, wait a minute. What else am I missing here? What, it's about suing your brother. It's about pride. It's not about taking a whipping and standing there saying, okay, I took your whipping, I still love you. Because Jesus flipped over tables in the temple.
Right. It's not about altruism.
Right.
Oh yeah, altruism. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you said the Tanya and what else?
Yep.
Tanya.
Yeah, I got it.
That's a deeply philosophical work.
That's one. Well, that's one that you recommended to me last time.
Yeah.
And it went into my list to get, and I missed that one. So
yeah, that one that's going to take you a while to get through. There's actually a year-long reading plan. If you follow the plan, it'll take you a whole year to go through it. And for some, because of its density in its content, it may take up to 2 years. You may have to divide the days in half.
Yep.
I'll be done by the time I'm 50.
It's not the Talmud. It's only 5 volumes. I think you can get through 5 volumes in a year.
I think, and Seamus, we're going to have to go ahead and lay down the bets here, but I think that his favorite volume is going to be the same as mine. I think he's going to like volume 1 the best, or like the first book. So the first book actually goes over like the anatomy of the soul.
Only one I'm gonna get through.
No, it's the most
really?
relevant to the philosophically minded.
Yeah, because
so
3 is more practical. I'd say chapter 20 is going to be his favorite chapter too.
Oh yeah,
but
the infamous chapter
in
16.
Judaism, they don't think of the soul like a dualism like a lot of Christians do, right? It's kind of like maybe a hylomorphism. It's like one and the same. Your identity is your body, your soul,
So they actually have a very unique idea of the soul, in that they actually believe that humans have 2 souls.
Why do I need 2?
We'll
let you read to find out.
Because according to Genesis 2:7, Adam did become a nefesh, a soul, or an animal soul per se. But he also had the neshama, or the divine soul.
So it'd be like 2 natures.
Yes,
that's one way.
That's actually.
Well, 2 natures is the easiest way to understand it. But then when you keep going in Tanya, you'll realize that there are 10 parts to each soul.
Nice.
And, then,
This is actually sounding extremely interesting.
And then it becomes less of a
fascinating.
nature and more of an actual soul. And you're like, okay, 10 natures, 10 levels, 10 Sephiroth, 10 dimensions, 2 souls.
That may even sway you on some of the Torah, because it in as much as it breaks down the anatomy of the soul, it breaks down exactly how doing the commandments affects each
soul
member or each body part of that soul.
Yep.
And speaks of it in terms of wearing the commandments as a garment, and how you don the commandments as a garment, which then influences our understanding of the parables where Jesus speaks about not being properly dressed for the wedding and what have you.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a really short book, and I'll leave this on this. It's Paul Philip Levertov, as a rabbi, went to yeshiva in the early 17th century. 18th century.
What's his last name?
Levertov, like lever and then Tov, Levertov.
Oh, that's easy enough.
And Paul Philip Levertov, he wrote a book called Love in the Messianic Age. It's only 65 pages. And the premise of the book is basically you cannot understand the Gospel of John without a thorough background in Tanya.
Wow.
And
I've always thought
I'll send you the PDF. I've got the PDF for that.
I always thought that John was more of a Hellenistic Greek kind of, because of the logos, talking about Christ.
And that's usually the accepted. And then this Jewish man who he'd actually never heard of Christianity.
Wow.
In his day. Yeah, he stumbled upon the Gospel of John. It was like a ripped piece of paper on the side of the street when he was walking home from yeshiva one day. And he was like reading this page, and he was like, wow, sounds like a great Hasidic Jew. I want to learn more about him. And he went to his rabbi, and his rabbi was basically like, never speak of this again. And then when he got his hands on his own copy of the Gospels, specifically John.
I remember one of you guys telling this story. Was it on one of your YouTube shows?
I think it was on my TikTok where I talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. I remember you talking about this. Yeah.
But yeah, he reads through John, and he thinks to himself, by now he's actually heard of Christianity. He knows a little bit about it. And so he reads this book of John, and he basically writes this in his book. He says to himself, this sounds like our book, not their book. And what he means by that is like, this is thoroughly a Jewish book. I don't understand how they have it. Like it's not theirs. And so he was baffled by the book. And so he decided to study it. And then his result of that was writing this little book, basically saying that, you guys think this is your book. It's actually our book. And you don't even know what you're reading.
Don't even understand. Right?
Yeah. And it's a very short, like literally 65, I think, pages.
Definitely read that, because I'd definitely be interested in that. Now, I know that there are some traditions in John that predate, I believe, all of the rest of the New Testament. There's some traditions that they trace back to like the earliest days of Christianity, as far as I don't remember off the top of the hand.
It depends. Yeah. As the historian in the room, the problem with John is a lot of what's written in John is not multiply attested, unlike the synoptics and then Q and then L and other documents that we can basically confirm the historicity of Jesus' sayings within those documents. But John is unique in that it's the only source. And so without that multiple attestation, we can only assume that what's written in John is traditions that were passed down orally and eventually written down later, because they weren't in the original synoptic gospels. But there's no definitive way of making that claim. It's more of a historical assumption with what information we have.
So I have one last question.
Sure.
And I think this is going to be an easy one. You don't have to give it nuance.
Pineapple.
What were the Nephilim?
What do you hold on. Shut the stream off. We're done here.
I have heard so many conflicting descendants of Seth's family, and then no, that's not really what it really was, talking about giants of the earth. And then I'd read something that said that I'm not sure which.
I actually did a whole series on this.
Did you? You know what? I might have read it. One was, watched it. It's been a while. I don't get on TikTok that much anymore. I would like to. I just kind of ADHD, man.
We're busy, man. We get it.
Well, I just lose interest. It's with TikTok itself. But so one of you guys may have said it, or I read it somewhere that they actually believe that demons were just the offspring of the Nephilim, or
that's a very common Perry Stone teaching. That modern demons are the disembodied souls of the offspring that resulted from angels and humans mating. No, so the Nephilim in Genesis 6 are mentioned as a deviation from the primary plot. It's almost a side thought, not necessarily a side thought, but kind of a keep this in the back of your head. So the whole Genesis chapter 6, it explains, okay, so man is beginning to increase on the earth. The sons of the rulers are taking forcefully wives from the daughters of men. And then it breaks away and says the Nephilim were on the earth at this time. And then it continues on with the rest of the narrative. And it's like, okay, so then what are they? Right. It's a great question. Now, a lot of your Christian watchers may note that I said the sons of the rulers. That is because that is how that is understood in Hebrew. You'd be pretty hard pressed to find a scholar who holds hard and fast to the interpretation that it says sons of God. Some may allow room for that interpretation, but they still lean very hard at sons of the rulers. And the reason for this is because the phrasing there is B'nai Ha Elohim. Okay. So there's the definite article ha effectively changes how we understand the word Elohim at that point, because up until this point, God is pretty much referred to just as Elohim, just straight up Elohim. That's it. Right. But so sons of B'nai, sons of Ha Elohim, the Elohim. Well, now Elohim has an article prior to it. So now we've got to understand what it means a little differently, because it's a deviation from the precedents that we have of how it's used. And it is used all throughout Scripture, not just as God, but also as powers, as rulers. It's used as judges even, which is Jesus uses it in that instance when the Pharisees accuse him of making himself God. We read that in English. Well, based on the passage that Jesus tells them at that point, we know what Hebrew word he said. He said Elohim, which could just as well mean judge or ruler. And in the context that he's quoting, it actually does mean judge. So the sons of the rulers, or the elite class at this point, are forcefully taking the women of the poor class as wives, and that's how the narrative is laying out. And then it says the Nephilim are on the earth at this time. The Nephilim, so Nephilim literally translates as the fallen in the plural tense. Nephal means to fall. That's literally what it means. It's a verb. So Nephilim being used as a noun in the plurality just means the fallen or the fallen ones. Right. So I would contend that the Nephilim are themselves the fallen angels.
Oh, the angels that aren't talked about until Revelation.
Depending on whether or not you consider the pseudepigrapha to be authoritative or not. Not talked about again until Enoch.
Right.
So we'll leave it on that note. Next time, maybe instead of putting you guys on the spot so much, we'll nail down a topic. And I just kind of wanted it to be free flowing, and I had to throw some little hardballs out there.
No, I actually prefer this sort of freestyle Lions Den.
Sweet.
Yeah,
I try to keep it around an hour, a little bit, because I have a short attention span, and so I assume everybody else does.
Maybe if I show them my hand again, it'll get their attention back.
It's rated R again.
Demonetized.
I would definitely like to have you guys back on. Even make it a regular thing if you want. It's I am just super fascinated and intrigued with how Judaism really underlies Christianity, so almost antithetical to a lot of what we hold today.
If you're a man of philosophy, right? You said
I pretend to be.
Well, all philosophers are pretends. Let's be real.
So Seamus, which philosophy of his history do you hold to?
Oh, philosophy of history. Wow.
Yeah, see, now, what is your philosophical position in history? Because there's not one.
No, there isn't.
Yeah, philosophy's your philosopher too, Seamus.
It's natural. So when you study history in the biblical narrative, you naturally have to study theology of the ancient mind, and then you have to apply that theology in your interpretation of what's going on historically, because that's how it affected them in that way. And so you have to adopt it for yourself in order to make your I don't want to say assumption, because but a lot of unfortunately a lot of historical accounts are sort of assumptive in a certain sense.
Okay.
So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I love when people, not that you were, but when people say stuff about philosophy, I'm like, and you're doing philosophy.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I do. I study a lot of Jewish philosophy because I have to, in order to understand the first century mindset.
You got to have the paradigm, man. You got to have the paradigm and the different angles.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I don't consider myself a philosopher in that, and by that, I mean, basically I study the philosophy itself, but I don't ponder the philosophy a lot. I usually learn it.
A philosopher.
I usually learn it, accept it as a fact, and then interpret what's happening historically through that lens, and then pass that information down solely as it is what it is. Like I'll say, hey, this is what first century Jews believed. Whether you believe that or not is entirely up to you. I don't know if I believe that, but this is what they believe, right? And that's kind of how I present a lot of my information. But I definitely, you can't not do philosophy if you're going to study history. That's just a fact.
Yeah. Well, you got to, I mean, do you take a Bayesian approach, or do you take inference to the best explanation? Do you take, just explanatory scope? But what is, you got to figure out which of all of it, maybe a little bit of all of them is.
So are you familiar with the documentary hypothesis in Old Testament writings?
I just heard about that the other day. That was the first I heard. Can you run through it real quick?
It's long story short, it's more or less that the Torah was actually a compilation.
That it was multiple writings and over multiple. Yeah, okay, yeah.
And so they divide it into like the priestly writings and then the historical writings. And so like there's this idea that certain parts of the Torah were definitely written by priests because of the wordings that's being used and the style of the writing. And sometimes they are inserted within other books. And so like Genesis will have bits and pieces of priestly, quote unquote, writings and so on and so forth. Same with Exodus. Leviticus is basically almost all priestly writing. But it's this kind of idea that everything's kind of pieced together from, over time. And there, I can't remember the name of the philosophy that of history that follows that same sort of pattern. Even though I don't subscribe to the documentary hypothesis, I think it's like Hume's is his name. If I'm wrong, I may be wrong. So people in the chat, please correct me. Hume's, I believe, the historian philosopher that basically believes that all of history is affected by history. And so sometimes, because of the history that other people are aware of, whether it be true or not, that affects the way they view their present, and it affects the way we view history. And so sometimes there are multi-layers and different additions and inserts that come with that kind of philosophy. And a great example of this is Josephus. He sometimes repeats himself thrice for the same event. And he gives different details of that event, so much so that a lot of early historians thought he was writing about 3 completely different accounts entirely. And then later recent scholarship has shown that he's actually writing about the same account, just in 3 completely separate ways. And so we thought for a long time that they were dated differently, but they actually ended up being dated the same day. And that's kind of like the idea behind that particular philosophy of history is you're trying to piece everything together, knowing that man is fallible, that there's different sources that you're using, and you're kind of really just puzzling what you can with what you do know. And then you have to, and there's no way around it, you have to make an assumption with what information you're given, because you're not going to be given 100% of the information.
Right. Well, I do want to say thank you guys so much for coming on here and sharing all of that with us. And Brad, I will let you plug you guys' stuff. Give you the last word.
Oh, yeah.
Kick you guys off the screen.
So you can find us on YouTube, Altarnate Media, Alternate spelled Altarnate, and then Media. We're also on Patreon. Both of us individually are on TikTok. I feel like there's one other one. Apple Podcasts. We're also there.
Sweet.
So yeah,
big time. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to see everybody out of here. You guys can, if you got to go, you can go. If you want to hang out in the backstage, I'll be back there in a moment.
Sure. All right.
Thank you.
Oops. Cut him off. Sorry about that, Seamus.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I got to bring you back for a second. Oh, well. Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry. I should have known as soon as I hit either one of you, it was like 50-50 shot. Somebody was going to talk.
All I was just going to say was thanks for having us on. Because you gave Brad the last word, so I was like, maybe I can say like hi, thanks, but
yeah. All right, thanks. You're going on first again, Seamus. Just so there's no. This
so
time
I'm first now.
No, I'll kick Brad off first.
No, okay. Get rid of me. Just write me off the screen.
All right, you guys be good.
Play me off, Johnny.
Oh, there we go. Brad and Seamus, Altarnate Media. That was fun. I enjoyed the conversation. I tried to pick their brain for every hard possible question that I've been dealing with. And I got some satisfactory answers and definitely a lot of resources to go look at so I can learn something. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and watching. I had Michael Jones with Inspiring Philosophy that was coming on before we had to take some personal time away. I am working with him to try to get him back on, or get him on as soon as possible. That was the next scheduled show. I have a couple others out there that I'm waiting on confirmation on. So I also have my first video editing that I'm going to be doing. It's a kind of a docudrama series where I interview people on the streets, particularly those from the streets, about their ideas on God and what God means to them if they believe in God, and if not, just how they feel in general about it. So I've been working through this one. It's a lot of work, but should be here next day or so. So look for the premiere for that. And I think you guys will definitely enjoy it. At least I hope you do. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.